Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I am absolutely delighted to be joined by JP Mason. John Paul, how are you? Welcome back.
Good, that was. I didn't get any. That was a no warning. A no warning going live. Yeah, good. Looking forward to getting back to the Celtic match on Saturday. Apparently, someone said last week in the live chat I don't go to the games. Might want to tell my bank balance that because.
Who said that?
Don't know. I didn't see it myself. I was just told about it.
See the thing with that, JP. When did this like you had to be a card carrying Celtic fan? When did that start? You're either a Celtic fan or you're not. Some people go to every game, home, away, European.
I think it's because I mentioned something about going to as many games as I can last week, and then somebody I think said to that, "Oh, he doesn't go to the games." I'm like,
strange.
Right, okay.
Rather strange, JP. I don't know where that elitism. I don't know where it started. I'm not sure when it started. And I've said this before, right? Because of the technological advances of content and smartphones and social media and stuff like that, people tend to know certain people who follow Celtic, be them vloggers, podcasters, whatever it may be. I mean, one of the most probably known Celtic supporters doesn't even have a podcast. But what I've always said is that the people I know from this neck of the woods, and we're going to have to touch on Dunfermline at some point in the day, JP, what is going on? Have watched Celtic for 50, 60 years. Never miss games. Nobody else outside the supporters bus knows who they are.
No.
It doesn't matter, does it?
Not really, no. I mean, if I said what I said last week about trying to get to as many games as possible, then is that not what you would do if you had a Glasgow postcode, and you could afford it, or at least try to afford it? I mean, sometimes this season it's been a lot. I mean, I would have loved to have gone to all the away European games, the October, November, December, but I mean, realistically, there was absolutely no way I could have done that. So I made it to Villa. That was a huge thing for me, getting to see Celtic against Aston Villa. And yeah, I just try and go to as many games as possible. Like I said, I'm a season ticket holder. I'm on the Home Cup ticket scheme. Not heard anything about Hampden yet for the St Johnstone game, but I'm sure that will be announced in due course, and I would be astonished if everybody that was in the Home Cup ticket scheme wasn't offered a ticket for that. So but I'm looking forward to going back Saturday, and just a 3 o'clock kickoff on a Saturday afternoon is a rarity as a Celtic fan, as everyone knows, because it's just we get pushed about from whatever slot they decide they want to put us on a weekend. So yeah, traditional 3 o'clock kickoff, and hopefully we right the wrongs of a couple of weeks ago.
Well, the big thing for me is we all support Celtic in different ways. Some people, through geographical default can't go to the games. Others can't afford to go to the games, and others are lucky enough to go and watch Celtic. Thankfully, because since lockdown, since we all stopped going to the games, I've been looking for a means of being able to cover the games, JP, and also attend. And I think I've managed to nail it. Yesterday, after months and months of discussions and looking at various places, Acsom will be based in Glasgow very, very soon. And when that happens in their own wee HQ, I'll be able to just leave the studio and go up to the game and come back. That's going to be that close. So I'm looking forward to that. That's going to have a different look and a different feel, but it's still going to be Acsom. And it's going to happen gradually. We won't frighten you. We won't go live without telling you, JP, as I just did to you there. We are going to be speaking about who might make the start 11 for that game, because obviously we've been suffering a wee bit of dismay in the international break. We'll be chatting about that. There's been a few people maybe off form, and people like Ida, who the international break's probably been quite kind to. So we'll chat all around that as well. We'll also be talking about what's happening at Halbeath Road these days. What is going on up there? We talk about requiring physicality. There's a wee bit of physicality up with Dunfermline just now. And also we are with the one, the only, Martin O'Neill this evening. It's sold out, and can I just say, I think we could have sold. The venue is Barazat Design, JP, and the capacity is 350. Now, at the moment, that's the kind of biggest gigs that we do. That's the biggest events that Acsom does. We have done bigger in the past, but in terms of regular, that's the biggest ones we have done. Even though Martin's been on, if you want to call it, the circuit for maybe 3 years now, we sold it out. We've got a waiting list of about 50. I mean, his popularity seems to be getting better as the years go on.
Well, it's probably word of mouth. People that have been at the previous events that have probably said to friends or whatever, or family, look, if you want to have a really good night out, make sure you get to another one of these, because there is a genuine, I know you said it before, buzz about being in a room with someone, and I always find that way. Anybody you go and see live, whether it's a gig or whether it's someone speaking about their time as a footballer or a manager or whatever, although it might not be completely intimate and you're having a one-on-one conversation, obviously I was fortunate enough to have that one-on-one conversation with Martin O'Neill talking about Mogwai and all sorts. But when you're in a room with somebody, you almost feel privileged because you're sharing the same airspace as them, and these people have done things that have impacted your life, and and you're recalling that time, and just again the significance of Martin O'Neill to current day Celtic is it can't be pushed past, because he really did kick the door in. And I was looking back at a post recently when my mate Chris and I met him at Celtic Park at a night he did there, and we queued for ages to meet him, absolutely ages, and only got like a couple of minutes with him, as everybody did. And when you're in that situation, you don't want to take up the time because you're aware that there's people behind you waiting. But I put a picture up on Instagram with myself, Martin O'Neill and Chris, and I just put, I will do the quotations, I will do everything I possibly can to bring some success here to the football club. And then I just put underneath it, and that he did. God bless Martin O'Neill. So yeah, he's a living legend in my eyes, and everybody going along tonight will have a great night in his company, because it does. He makes that room, whether there's 350 people in it or 3 people, he makes you feel like you're speaking to him. You know, it closes in those walls, and it feels like you're having a conversation with him in a living room or something like that. And obviously, credit to yourself as well for making it feel like that too, because obviously he feels relaxed in your company to be able to speak the way he does. I've not really seen him with many other people. So, aye.
There's a great energy around Martin O'Neill, and that quote, that for me, and by the way, I know that in terms of the club and the stability, Fergus McCann started it all off, and I know that we had to stop the 10, and Wim Jansen was the manager that did that. But in terms of utter domination, the domination that we are currently living in, JP, that started, you know, on the steps of Celtic Park that day when he uttered those words. That's when it started, and the incredible amount of success we've had since then. Honestly, I mean, when you look throughout the history of the football club, have we ever been as dominant over a period of time? Because even when you look at Jock Stein's domination, Jock Stein was obviously the manager from 1965 right up until 1978. So that period of time, you know, 13 years of domination in Scottish football. And there was a couple of blips, obviously, near the end of that period after the 9 in a row. This is a generation. This isn't 13 years. This is now 25 years. And every now and again, yeah, you lose a trophy, and every now and again you lose a league. But Celtic have dominated since that moment he uttered those words. And yeah, I love Tommy Burns' team. I absolutely loved it. There's a romanticism around that team because it was the team I watched as a season ticket holder for the first time. 94, 95, Tommy's team. And I loved watching it grow from, you know, playing Barry Smith and Jim Slavin to then having Paolo Di Canio, George Cadet, Andy Tom, Pierre Van Hooydonk. Phenomenal upturn, you know, going from Hampden back to Celtic Park, just a buzz. Everything was great. But if I was to say who the best manager has been that we've had in my lifetime, it's got to be Martin O'Neill. It's got to be Martin O'Neill. I mean, I was born December 78, and that was the season when 10 men stopped. 10 men won the league. Billy McNeil was the manager at that point. So you can trace Billy McNeil's first tenure right up to the present day and all the managers that have come and gone in that period. Martin O'Neill's the finest, if you ask me. Would you share that view? And I mean, I love Brendan Rodgers. I loved Neil Lennon. I've said this to you before as both a player and a manager. I loved what Neil Lennon brought to this football club, what he dedicated to the football club. It didn't end well, but that doesn't, you know, change my view on Neil Lennon as being a legend. But Martin O'Neill's number one for me.
I think most of the players and and managers would probably point to Martin O'Neill as being the person whose footsteps they're following in recent times. And obviously they'll point to Jock Stein in the further past. But Martin O'Neill, like you say, has crossed over probably 2 generations. There's people that are the children of people like me and you who didn't witness and didn't bear witness to Martin O'Neill as the manager of Celtic, but they'll watch the Larson chip and the European run and the success that we enjoyed under Martin O'Neill and be like, that must have been good, because it was. Not that the recent success hasn't been, but it was so good because we'd been starved of it for so long at that time. So all of a sudden we felt like we could sit at a table at the Champions League and play against Juventus and everything else. And he was responsible for that. I mean, rewind back 5-6 years from Martin O'Neill and you're struggling to get past European minnows in the UEFA Cup, in the third round and everything else. And then all of a sudden you're actually mixing it with Champions League level Champions League teams. I mean, that game in Amsterdam, well, I'll never forget that. They'll remain my favourite away trip ever. Like, to go to the Amsterdam Arena and beat Ajax handily as well. Was unbelievable. Like, the atmosphere in the ground that night was incredible. Like their fans put on a show. I always forget the classical piece that they played. Somebody will know it, no doubt, but they all had flags on each other's seats. So the red and white flags on the home end seats and green and white flags on the away seats. So you just had this whole stadium in unison, and we just copied what they were doing, like, to this tune, and it was a spine tingling. I'm getting shivers thinking about it because it was that good. And obviously my first time in Amsterdam as well, so I enjoyed the other culinary delights of Amsterdam, not those ones.
You soaked up the culture. Yeah. I mean, knowing you probably went to to maybe an exhibition over there, something like that. Stanley Kubrick, I think, had an exhibition in Amsterdam.
No, we went to the Grasshopper. I remember that because we came out of the Grasshopper, which is a cafe, a bar, and a restaurant on 3 levels. Right. And as we came out, we found out that somebody had been shot, and it turned out to be a hit job or something like that on some gang dispute or whatever. Because everyone was like, someone's been shot, and there was a bit of concern over the fact that maybe a gunman on the loose shooting Celtic fans, but it was a specific hit, and it happened to a guy in Hooters Show Bar, I believe, and I actually saw him coming out on a stretcher and going into the ambulance. So that's brutal. When you're under the influence of certain things, that can send you down a dark path. So it was luckily it was just it was a singular event. I don't think the guy did lose his life, thankfully. So, but whenever something like that happens, it's like the same when you go away and you hear bother with police in Spain. I remember being in Valencia and we weren't at the particular bar that it all kicked off at, but you don't want to get caught up in that sort of thing when you're away, trying to have a nice time supporting Celtic.
Exactly, but you've brought up the police, and it's a brilliant segue to get on to another subject that we have discussed, JP, but it's worth discussing again, just to let everybody know. We will have a spokesperson from Fans Against Criminalisation on the show tomorrow to discuss this. There is a fan protest outside London Road Police Station, and it's not just because of the flashpoints outside the ground at the Rangers game. It's kind of been a build-up, I think, of the way that football fans have been targeted by the police. That was the final straw. I mean, you'll have heard people's testimonials about what's been going on that particular day. We've read the reports, the behaviour and the treatment of women and children who got caught up in it, and a number of influential Celtic fans groups have got together and created and organised this protest. So as I say, we'll have a member of the FAC in tomorrow on the show. Really looking forward to hearing their view on it. We're right behind them, JP, because you and I could have been caught up in it, and we need to take a stand, don't we? We really do. Otherwise, it's going to be getting to a point when you go to the football where they're making it very difficult to go and watch your football team. whereas in other countries, and you've travelled watching Celtic, in other countries, they embrace the fact that people are actually going to watch this game of football and all the other economical benefits that the wider area enjoys as a result of the footfall. But in this country, it seems as though you can't drink, you can't wear a pair of shades, you can't wear a balaclava. I mean, you can't even just walk to the football without being impeded. It's got to change, hasn't it?
I think listening to, I forget what day of the week it was, whenever Liam was on and you were talking about it, and he was sort of saying it's a slippery slope to fascism when you start getting flags taken off you, and you're like, wait a minute, why am I getting a Palestine flag taken off me? Like, what's wrong with that? Why am I getting an Irish tricolour taken off me? What's wrong with that? Those things can easily slip into becoming like normal, as he said. So if you do sort of give in to this kind of idea that it's like, all right, well, sorry, we'll do what you say and we'll approach games the way that you say. It's like, no, I'm still looking forward to hearing what the official outcome of that is, because was it not mentioned on that show that there's potential legal ramifications?
Yeah.
In terms of they've got a case to answer. Yeah,
breaching the legislation. The problem, any time that you're being dealt with by authority, JP, is just with regards to the powers and the breach of those powers, what you can and can't do if you're the authoritarian in that situation. And I think the issue is this is a temporary piece of legislation, right? So it's introduced. I think they probably I think it was confirmed maybe in the week leading up to the game. So it's not something that's set in stone, and it's certainly not something that the police officers who were there will be using regularly. This is the thing, right? A lot of the cops that are involved in that won't be using that legislation regularly. So they're familiarising themselves with it, and they're getting it wrong. They're absolutely getting it wrong. And I think the blame stands with whoever was in control, who was the head honcho that day, and what is the instruction? What is the narrative that's being put out there in their briefing before they actually leave whatever police office they leave to then start integrating with the public? Because they are, but they're getting in about Celtic fans, many of whom are not a part of any kind of ultra group. And they're just lumping it into this ultra problem, And I think this has been the issue from day one. Back in the 80s and the 90s, there was an issue with hooliganism, not just in South, but in Scotland as well. There was proper casual groups. The casual movement was massive in Scottish football, wasn't it? I mean, Hibs, Aberdeen, the Celtic soccer crew. I don't know what the Rangers guys called themselves, but, all these teams had casual groups. And the thing with that is the difference, I believe, with this is it's not as though ultras are just casuals under a different banner. Casuals actively went to the football for a ruck. I mean, we've all seen the movies, JP, right? The best being ID by a country mile, I've got to say. Shadwell with Gumbo and all that. But we've all seen what the casual movement is all about. The ultra movement's not about that. The ultra movement is not about creating disorder, yet they have been dealt with, but from day one, as if they're hooligans. That's the biggest issue here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really, from the away games that I've been at, I don't really see any of the Celtic ultras sort of arranging meetups to go and fight wee guys at Motherwell. Like the Motherwell have got whatever the block H, or I don't know. It's not block H, prisoner cell block H. That's what I'm thinking of.
I'm just thinking of theme tune now, JP.
I always just like it because you used to see folk for neighbours and home and away in it before they were in. sad but true. But no, like that Motherwell stand is a bunch of wee guys. Basically, they're teenagers. So it's not as if sort of the Green Brigade or the boys are arranging to meet up with them to scrap with them. I mean, they've wiped the floor with them clearly. So that's not what it's about for them. It's about bringing political occurrences into the mainstream, as they have done, and starting the Show Israel the Red Card campaign, which absolutely was taken on by a number of clubs. I think over 100 clubs. Am I right in saying that? So
I mean, that started a movement across nations. That started a movement. Phenomenal.
Yeah. I mean, that's not like starting fights in a bit of waste ground outside a game on a Sunday afternoon at midday or something like that. You know, that there's a far bigger and more important picture there that is being allowed to happen, or should be allowed to happen anyway. When they do it, they also bring colour and atmosphere to the games. You can't deny that. And I think they were definitely missing in that game against Rangers. I'm not saying that they made some radical difference, but you want every box ticked going into a game like that, whether it's having your captain available or having your vociferous ultras available, tifos available.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all these things are things that you want to go into games like that with. It's exactly the same as a Champions League game. Like Champions League games without the Green Brigade is just lunacy, I think. And then you look back to the way the atmosphere was around the club in sort of October, November last year. No, not last year, year before. Am I right? I've lost track of time. When was the months that we lost to Hearts? That wasn't last year. That was the year before.
It was the year before, yeah, because it was the kind of November time, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was November time, and the Green Brigade were locked out.
Yeah,
and it was very apparent when you were going to the games at home that there was a huge gap in that corner, and not just visually but audible as well. So, I think, I don't know if what the police were trying to do on London Road was to try and what's the word, goad the Celtic fans into some sort of scuffle or attack or straight up fight. I don't know, but I mean, they obviously did well to resist that and not sort of maybe give them what they wanted. But totally agree with the protest on Saturday, and I'll be going along because, as Liam said, it was them that day. It could quite easily be you on another day, depending on what officer you encounter and where that is and when it is and what they've decided to, what orders they've decided to follow on that particular day, like you said, because you can't flip flop on this. If that's what they're deciding to do with regards to football fans, then they're going to need to be consistent, and if they are consistent, then they're going down like a pretty dark path, I think.
Yeah, and you go to the game without the knowledge that you may get stopped if you're wearing a snood, shades, a bonnet, a balaclava. I don't know who goes to the game wearing a balaclava, but you might be a kneecap fan for all I know. But you're going to these games without that knowledge. It's not as though you're doing it to antagonise the cops or to breach the legislation. You're just going because it's a particularly cold day, perhaps, or that is your attire, and that's what you wear to the football.
And it's a look, isn't it? I mean, it's like it's not what I choose to wear to football, but I don't have an issue with anybody wearing whatever they want to wear. What difference does it make, really? I mean, what illegal things are they doing? The only thing that has been banged on about is pyro. But yet pyro managed to make its way into the stadium that day somehow.
Yeah, they're shouting from the rooftops how successful the operation has been. I'm talking about the police here. Well, if it's successful, how did pyro manage to get into the stadium? You're going to blame the security. You're going to blame the stewarding. You know, there's always blame somewhere. JP, yep, we will be talking more about that tomorrow. We're going to be getting right back into the football, but before we do that, let's have a look at some of the comments coming through. Paddy Lavery, always a pleasure to see you bouncing in. Here we go. Give Benzo a chance against Hearts.
No chance.
I faith in the lad. He's never had a sniff. Yes, it is tongue-in-cheek, absolutely. It needs to be sine salo. That was the biggest takeaway from the international break was the injury to Casper. We will be up at the press conference today. It is today, this afternoon. There's a press conference up at Celtic Park. Then the email that I got said it was with a player. So I don't know if we're going to have an audience with Brendan and a player, if that was just not added into the email. But Chris will be up there speaking to whoever is part of the press conference, and I'm pretty sure all the injuries will be given an update. JP, this is the most concerning of them all, though, isn't it? Casper Schmeichel.
Bit weird this on a Thursday, though, right?
I know. Yeah. Hopefully I'm not sending Chris up on the wrong day.
The Schmeichel injury, from what I've read, it was from a phase of play that was allowed to continue that was offside, and there was no real need for that to happen. And how many times have we heard that being mentioned, that could happen as a thing, and then it happens to us with our number one goalie, and you're like, it's really, really annoying, because it has been mentioned a few times where, and fans quite rightly, whether it's us or you're watching another game and they allow it to happen, you can hear the anger in the stadium at the fact that something's been allowed to continue when it's quite clearly not side or whatever, or there's been a foul. I don't know, but this instance, it just seems to be really, really bad luck on our part. But it's quite odd how it's fluctuating between the 2 weeks and 2 or 3 months. Like Simon Donnelly said on Super Scoreboard last night, that he's heard that it could be 2 months, but it could also be 2 weeks. So it seems strange that they haven't come up with an actual proper diagnosis after a good few days now. You'd think, I mean, scans.
Two ends of the scale. That was like, I remember when the publisher used to get in touch with me about the Celtic jersey. When's it's going to be finished? Paul says, well, it could be 2 months or 2 years. I'm not sure. There was a wide kind of possibility as to when that was going to be submitted, JP. In the end, it took 7 years. Hopefully it doesn't take as long as that for Casper, but there doesn't seem to be any accurate info, and that's why Brendan's not going to be at the press conference. I've just had a look. It's definitely today, this afternoon up at Celtic Park. We don't know who's going to be there. But yeah, like you say, it was Peter Grant's go-to on commentary, wasn't it, to talk about that the fact that they would allow the phase of playing. He kept saying someone's going to get injured. So I look forward to this weekend when I'm thinking Peter Grant might be on co-commentary duties. He will bring that up because he's been talking about it since it was introduced, and we've been the fall guys. There's a chance he's out for the rest of the campaign, JP, right? And the big thing for me is we shouldn't really have, I don't think a club like Celtic should have a fear when a player has to go for recuperation, or if they're suspended, whatever. We should be in a position where you slot someone in. Now, that was obviously the idea in the pre-season. That's why Sinisalo came in. Someone in the comments yesterday or the day before said Sinisalo was a club signing and Schmeichel was Brendan's signing. Maybe so. But this is a goalkeeper who's been working with Casper all season, day in, day out. There must be someone, and who's got a great record bar, I think, one.
I heard Chris calling him invisible hands again yesterday. I mean, the guy played 18 games for Celtic. I'll defend that guy forever. I honestly don't think he was as bad as all that. If he hadn't had that price tag with him, I don't think anybody would have been as up in arms about him as they have been and are.
A wee bit of information started trickling out about him, actually, right, in relation to the way that he'd almost checked out by the time he came in. How many games did you say that he played?
I thought it was 18. I counted them at one point.
Did you? No. I'm just looking, right, because there's a habit, picking up on a player and saying, oh, they were rotten. And Carol Muggleton always gets it, doesn't he? And I'm just had to look. Carol Muggleton played 13 games for Celtic back in 1994. Now, I'm going to have a look at Vasilis Barkas, seeing how he's in the conversation here, just to see. Did he play more or less games than Carol Muggleton? Let's have a look. He played 24 games for Celtic.
All right, okay. Maybe they're including friendlies and stuff like that as well. But I thought it was 18. But okay, I'll stand corrected.
Talking of friendlies, I think the one game where I looked at him and thought you're not interested was the West Ham game. Remember they beat us 6-2 under Ange.
The whole team, that was, I mean, look back at that team sheet, I'm pretty sure it wasn't what became the Ange Postecoglou team that won the league that season. It was not anywhere near it. We were so far off it in that game. It was a weird as anything atmosphere. There was 15, 20,000 socially distanced in the ground.
Yeah.
That was my first game back at Celtic Park since the St Mirren game in the not the previous season, the season before that. So it would have been March 2020 was the last time I was in Celtic Park before that West Ham game. So sitting in the North Stand away up, getting the free Radnor waters, which still give me fear when I see them lying in lying on the floor at Celtic Park, because obviously they sell them now. They didn't sell them then; they had to give them away. They were just on tables in the concourse, because obviously you had to provide. It was a really hot day, but you had to provide water. I think as mandatory, but no, I mean the Sinisalo thing obviously has been brought in for a reason. He's not been brought in to spectate. He's been, like you say, you need to have somebody there ready to go in, and I don't have any massive fears about him going in, because he's an international. He's been training, like you say, with Schmeichel all season and Stevie Woods. He knows what it takes to play for Celtic. He's seen enough games as a guy on the bench to see what is expected of you as a player and the concentration levels that you need to have, because you're not going to be getting peppered the whole time, but there will come a moment half an hour into a game where suddenly a team will get a break maybe, and then you've got to be switched on, ready to do your job. And I would hope that that's what he's able to do on Saturday, should he play. I don't think there's any doubt that he'll play if Schmeichel's not available. And Schmeichel's not going to be here forever. And if there is a succession plan in place for Sinisalo, then it's good for him to get some games that actually mean something, rather than just a early round of the cup or a pre-season friendly or something like that. I mean, this is a big game for us off the back of a defeat that none of us expected to have happened, you know.
Yeah, and I mean, I've just looked at Sinisalo with regards to his senior career. He's played 91 games of football, but as you say, he's also he's a full international cap as well. So 3 games for Finland. He's got a few games under his belt, and it's just one of the ones that's like he's not a 17-year-old who's getting chucked in, and you're kind of hoping that he's able to do himself justice. He's got experience, JP, so he needs to step up. It's as simple as that. I just hope Schmeichel's injury doesn't go on. And one of the players that I'm frustrated with this season because of that is probably Paulo Bernardo. James Flores probably falls into that category. These guys disappeared, and we've not seen them for months. And Bernardo's one of these guys that I think that his contribution, we always focus on Ida because he scored the big goals last season, but I felt that Bernardo's contribution as well was massive in relation to us winning the double. He's not really had a sniff this season, but that's down to injuries, and I'm hoping that we get an update on that soon. Here we go, Jungle Line. The tagline is we should actually keep Reo and Maeda. This is my opinion. JP might disagree with that. There's all this talk around Maeda getting a new contract, which I don't think many of us will disagree with. But I want to throw Reo into the mix as well, because and there's a roundabout way of me coming to that conclusion, not just the ability of the player, JP, but also look at that midfield. And at the beginning of the season, I thought it was the strongest area of our team. And I'm now looking at it thinking to myself, well, McGregor dropped out the other day and we looked pretty ordinary, in the last game. I want to talk about the midfield in that respect. Callum McGregor drops out. We've got to do better without him, don't we?
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think there's a guarantee that he's back on Saturday. I mean, we'll find out, I'm sure, today. But I think you could still maybe be classed as doubtful for Saturday. So then you've got to think, right, well, what are you going to do? Because the last midfield didn't perform well in that first half, and were allowed to be dominated for a fairly significant time of the game until they got it together in the second half. But you don't want to give Hearts any opportunity to get in this game. And I know that they've been on an okay run in the last wee while. I think they've won a significant amount of their games in the last wee while, apart from obviously the Hibs game, which was enjoyable to see them lose. I think that the midfield on Saturday. But with regards to Hatate getting a new contract, I would only be even contemplating that if it's something that the player really wants to do. Like I've heard so much about him wanting a move and feeling like he deserves a move, and seeing other players get moves like Matt O'Reilly and things like that, and then going, "Oh, where's my move?" type thing. And if that is the truth, then absolutely no way should he be getting a new contract, because you're getting somebody that's not fully bought in. He's not. You cannot possibly say that Reo Hatate has the same mentality and work ethic that Maeda has. Like, I would be giving Maeda the keys to the kingdom as far as I'm concerned, because
Yeah.
he's the one player, and I said it at the time, the one player that I was worried about losing out of all of them, in terms of the Japanese players that Ange had brought in, because I was thinking he'll come back and get him. Why would you not? Why would Spurs have got money to burn? They would just be like, well, here's 10 million, you'll take it for Maeda, and then knowing Celtic, they probably would, and then we would lose such an important player that Brendan Rodgers has said is the kind of prototype for the game that he wants to play, and everybody watching has seen that this season, and even Maeda's detractors out with Celtic have been forced to sort of go, what a player he is, eh? Imagine having him in the team. And you're like, well, we've been watching it the whole time he's here. He might not have had the end product and the finesse that he's now displaying, but he's always had that effort, and that's always why I would have wanted him in the team, because 90th minute he's still running back to the right back position or the left back position to cut out an attack, even if we're 2 or 3 goals to the good.
He never checks out. You know, this is a big thing, JP, right? People say, well, that's a prerequisite. If you're at a club like Celtic, it's 100% effort for, every moment you're on that park. These players are human, and some of them check out. And I don't mean check out in terms of, I've chopped it. But it's a confidence thing. Reo Maeda, at times, you watch him in games and he's like a passenger. Adam Maeda recently has been a bit like that. Maeda's never like that. Never. He's on it constantly. What I love about him this season is, if you look at the previous 2.5 seasons in a Celtic jersey, because mind, he came in January, didn't he, in Angie's first campaign, came in on loan with an obligation to buy. So 2.5 seasons at Celtic, and he scores 29 goals. This season he scored 28. He's really having that purple patch. And you mentioned Matt O'Reilly. Matt O'Reilly had that season, that kind of like defining season, and he earned a move, right? So that when you were talking about Reo maybe believing that he's earned a move, he's not done anything close to that. He's not had the season that Matt O'Reilly had last season. He's not had a season like Maeda's having this season, JP.
No way. And the thing is, you need to have that if you want to get that blockbuster move, so to speak. Then you need to have that season in Scottish football, because people will be like, well, you only did that in Scottish football, and X, Y, and Z player has done what you did in for other clubs. Why would we want to splash 15 million on you and pay you 60, 70, 80 grand a week when we could get it from elsewhere? Like, in order to get that move, you do really need to have a kind of, I've dominated Scottish football as a player this season. Look at my numbers. There's my assists. There's my goals. All the other analytics that they look at in terms of contribution to games, and they're not consistent from Hatate. There is games where you've seen him lying on the deck, absolutely knackered at the end of the game, having to be picked up by a teammate or whatever because he's given it all, but he's not doing that every single game. And you know he's not doing it every single game, because he didn't do it at Ibrox, did he? In January, and he didn't really do it at Celtic Park a couple of weeks ago. And that's when you're looking for these players to stand up and be counted. And I've not got an issue with him getting a move as a result of having a season like that, but he's not. So do you then reward him with a better contract and more wages for what has been not a consistent return? I don't think so.
No, I mean, both players are 27. We've constantly looked at the fact that Reo came into the senior game really late because of the university system in Japan. I mean, he only had 3 seasons of football prior to signing for Celtic, and in his first season, he had 1 appearance. So not a lot. 75 games of football before we signed him, JP. So in terms of age, you look at experience and you look at age, but game experience, he did not have that. He only had 75 games under his belt when we signed him. And I don't think he's had the breakout season. This campaign, he's played a lot more football. Obviously, had bad injuries last season. And he has scored probably a better return when it comes to goals. But he's never hit double figures for Celtic when it comes to goals. For an attacking midfield player, you would have expected him to get into double figures. And he's not done that yet. I think Reo Maeda needs to stay.
His composure when balls get cut back to him is horrendous. Like, the amount of times he's skied shots over the bar, you could put a compilation of them together to make him look like a terrible footballer, because they'd all be in different games and they'd all be in different strips. So that's a really frustrating thing for me. His composure is just okay. Gets the goal against Rangers at Celtic Park, and it was a decent finish. But there's been so many that should be meat and drink to somebody like that. You should be practicing that all week, being like, right, this is going to happen a lot in these games. We're going to have a winger on either side who's of good quality, who can lay it off to you. You should be hitting the target. You shouldn't be skying it into the stands and then looking up at the sky as if, oh, woe is me.
Where did that come from? Exactly. We've seen it before. But you know, the big thing for me with Rio, I don't think we've seen the best that we can see of Rio in a Celtic jersey, JP. I remember when he came in, I, amongst others, were raving about him. And you were like, temper your enthusiasm about this guy. He's not done anything yet. You know, I remember it, early doors. And then he's not had that consistent season, but I do think he's got it in him. And
I do too, but whether or not he wants to do it at Celtic, and obviously the manager's thoughts on this would be of paramount importance, because if Brendan Rodgers thinks he can get a season out of him like that, and that would involve him getting a new contract or whatever, but it's getting quite late in his career now for him to get that move, you know, the move that he probably craves. So it's kind of like, do they sit down in the summer and go, right, this is the season. This is the season you do it. This is the season you put up those numbers, and then, you know, you can put the fishing rod out and see what clubs bite. But I just don't know if and then it gets to the point where he's 28. What are Celtic looking to get from him in terms of a transfer fee? A 28-year-old attacking midfielder. I don't know. I'd be interested to know what Celtic value him at, because obviously it's mad to think that that's how you go in your career, and you get to like 27, 28, and folk are starting to talking about putting you out to pasture and everything else, and you're like, wow. Like, I don't think people really thought about that 20 years ago or whatever. Did they? I mean, obviously we signed Moravchik and he was 33. I mean, I remember sort of everybody kind of raised eyebrows when we signed him, but I don't really recall there being that kind of, if you sign somebody at 29, 30, then it's kind of like, what are you doing that for? I mean,
the big thing for me was always the model wasn't there, JP, in terms of always buying to make a profit on a player. And I think that's where the age comes into it. The age profile comes in, because they're thinking, right, you need to hit the sweet spot with their age and their performance, and then make a profit.
What age was Lennon when we signed him?
He'd have been mid-20s. He'd maybe even older than that, 27.
Aye, I think he was older, yeah. And we paid 5.5–6 million for him.
Well, that's a classic example. That's a great example. Is Martin O'Neill's team certainly wasn't bought to make a profit off it. It was bought to win. So you look at the guys like John Hartson, Chris Sutton, Alan Thompson, Neil Lennon. You know, they were all, I'm going to say the wrong side of 25. That sounds terrible. Nice. You know what I mean? That's very, very young. The wrong side of 25, they were between 25 and 30 years of age, so that when Martin O'Neill actually left the building, all these guys who were still there was no selling value. I mean, what did we sell the guys for? Nothing. I think we might have got 500 grand for John Hartson when he went to West Bromwich Albion. But other than that, we didn't make money off the rest of the guys. They were basically just taken off the wage bill, weren't they? Free transfers.
Sutton just left like without any fanfare. And you think how great Sutton was for Celtic, and he didn't get a send off. There was no kind of, I mean, I don't even remember where Sutton went after Celtic. He did go somewhere, didn't he?
He went to Aston Villa. Now, let me just double check though if it was Villa before Birmingham, because he also went to Birmingham. But I thought he was one of the guys that Martin O'Neill took down to Villa. You know, Petrov, Maloney, Agat, and Sutton all ended up going to Aston Villa. But no, I think that's a classic example of a team, and that was only 25 years ago. You know, buying in a group of players because you wanted to do something in Europe, rather than, you want to do something in Europe, but you also want to make money off all these guys. And the board will be looking at Hatate and Maeda in that respect. We can't, at this moment in time, I don't think, afford to continue to build, JP, if we're going to lose Jota, Abada, Kyogo, Matt O'Reilly, and continually lose a player who is a first pick for your team. Because at the moment, that's what we've done over the last, 2-3 seasons. And then in the past, you can start pulling out all the other big names that we have made money on. But do we really need to keep doing that? Do we really need to, if we can, qualify for the Champions League group stages, do we need to sell a big play? We don't. We've got the money in the bank, and there's no need for us to do that. It's not like we need to balance the books. So I'm all about quality and adding quality to what we've already got. There's still a wee bit of deadwood, most of whom are out on loan at the moment, JP. But I think we're at a stage at the moment where the squad can't get any thinner. And I think we've seen that against Rangers in the 3-2 game. Can't get any thinner than it currently is. He's operating with about 20 players at the moment, at 5 of whom are injured or were against Rangers. So we need to add to that. There need to be additions. So if you lose Maeda or Hatate, then you can add another player to purchase in the summer. And then, I don't like the word rebuild. Absolutely, it's not rebuild after a treble if we win the treble. But I've heard people talking about that, which I think is bizarre. Jay Conley, Jay Larkin, you're in, and we're talking about the starting 11 against Hearts. And you, assuming all are fit, would choose the following: Sinisalo in goals, Alistair Johnston, Schlupp at left back, CCV and Trusty in the middle, Paulo Bernardo, yes, if he was fit at the moment, and I want to talk about this, I think he might squeeze into my team, Kalmak, Arnie Engels, Jota, Kuhn and Maeda. The midfield was really disappointing against Rangers, JP, but I think Luke McCowan came out of the game having had a better second half.
Yeah.
But for me, I look at that and I think to myself, the sooner Bernardo gets back, the better for this running. Now, I'm not writing McCowan off, absolutely not. But I don't think he's the same kind of stature of player. And I'm not just talking about unfashionable or the fact that he didn't cost us a lot of money and he came from an unfashionable club. It's nothing to do with that. I just think in terms of the ability of Paulo Bernardo over Luke McCowan, the sooner he comes back and fit, the better, because he might not get in my starting midfield. If McGregor's fit, it would be McGregor, Engels and Hatate, but he'd definitely be my next choice, Paulo Bernardo.
Yeah, he has been missed. I mean, how long has he been out for now? Feels like a long time.
A couple of months at least,
Yeah. Like December?
Yeah,
I don't think he played this year.
I'll check that while you're chatting. I'll have a look when he last played.
But no, I do like Bernardo as well, and I think he offers something different in the midfield, and he's got a pretty decent physicality about him as well, which maybe was a bit lacking in that game a couple of weeks ago. I certainly share your point about looking at the bench and just going, wow, our bench is so weak compared to how it has been when we've got everyone fit and firing. But yeah, Bernardo would start a game for me on Saturday, I think, if it was possible. But I mean, it seems to have been. I don't think he'll start games straight away. I mean, surely he'll just get eased back off the bench in the first instance, rather than just coming out of cold storage and starting a game. I don't think that's going to happen. So I think it probably will be, hopefully, Engels, McGregor and Hatate on Saturday, because McGregor's not going to have enjoyed being out, and certainly not being out and watching us lose. That's not something that will sit well with him, and he's not had the opportunity to rally the troops on the pitch, which is what I said was one of the things missing. Despite the fact that he played at Ibrox, he didn't get an opportunity to rectify what happened there. He had to stand and watch it, which, I mean, I can only imagine how frustrating that must be when you're someone like Cal McGregor, who has become accustomed to winning and is a really, really, really top player, and to sit in the stand and not be able to be on that pitch to affect things. Yeah, I would be surprised if you could even sit still. I'd be like pacing about, just being like gritting my teeth, like wanting to just get stripped and get out there and play with whatever injury I've got, like just play through it.
And this is the thing that he's proven he would. All that period he wore the mask. Would he get stopped walking down London Road with that mask on? So he played through the pain barrier because he still had that injury to his cheekbone and his eye socket. Played through that, didn't he? And then you look at the fact that he made a massive decision this season to retire from the international football. You can't take that lightly. He decided, right, I need to concentrate on club football. Then he gets
he probably did it after Sunday anyway. That was terrible.
Poor, wasn't it? It was very, very poor. I don't know. I mean, as soon as I seen it coming in the social media tell you after that. I was busy that night. I was working. I can't remember what I was doing. So I never watched the game. I was doing something else. But I seen the reaction to it, JP, you know, the people who actually follow Scotland all over the place, and they wanted Clark out, and some of that will be knee jerk. I just think, you know, be careful what you wish for. We did not qualify for anything for 2 decades. You know, and it's like this guy is getting us there and thereabout, and we are qualifying for major tournaments, etc., the finals. So just be careful what you wish for. Yeah,
if you can present a replacement that's
yeah,
available, would want the job, and has the chops, then fair enough. Be happy to hear it, but it's not as if there's a huge queue outside Hampden Park waiting to become Scotland manager. I wouldn't have thought anyway.
There's not an obvious one. You know, sometimes where if someone isn't doing particularly well in a job, you're thinking, oh, you know, you could have this guy. There doesn't seem to be an obvious one at this moment in time. JP, getting back to Callum McGregor, yeah, he's made that big decision to retire from the international setup, and he's sitting there frustrated watching that. It must be really frustrating. He is the general. He's Brendan Rodgers. He's general on that part. The sooner we get him back, the better. Calf injury, yeah, that seems to have been niggling for a few weeks before he actually missed out. Joe Hamilton, always a pleasure to see you. You're on the YouTube. If you're watching YouTube, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and whatever we're doing will be underneath in the description. We are going to be joined by the one and only Lubo Moravcik. We watched the game last weekend in the absence of any Celtic.
I watched it, not with you, but I watched it a few days later on YouTube.
How did you find watching it? That's the first time I've watched it back, JP.
Me too.
What did you think? What was your summary?
I must have been very drunk.
Can't remember much of it. No,
not really. I come back from France for it. Like I said to you, I hate flying, but I flew myself back from France because I was living there when I was a student, and we had to go and live in France for 6 months, which was no great hardship, especially when it was in the south in Nice. But yeah, I came back that weekend, and it was just a drunken weekend. The whole time I was back, I was just basically on the sauce. I out the night of the game as well, and ended up in the IB, the International Bar, which is our pub in Edinburgh, the Heriot Watt CSC. Right. But yeah, watching it back, I was just like, wow, I genuinely don't really remember it. It was a forgettable game in many respects. Just so weird, like especially watching it back. The YouTube upload that I watched didn't have any of the commentary or who was the panel that was in the studio that day. So I would obviously never have seen that, but just seeing they did briefly interview Kenny Dalglish at the end. He's kind of very dry as you come to expect from him and his response, but it's strange that the things that Kenny Dalglish says at the end of that, when you think about what happened in the subsequent season and then subsequent seasons, if you look back to what Kenny Dalglish said in that interview, he doesn't predict it, but he basically says this is what we come to expect. Because they asked him about winning the trophy, and he went, "That's what Celtic's about," But we hadn't done nearly enough of it in that time, and then we go on to win what we have done in the last 25 years, and it's kind of like a nice segue into Martin O'Neill, and obviously Tommy Burns being there as well, like pacing the touchline, and it was brilliant to see Tommy. So it just obviously always was invested, but I mean particularly so in a final when he's been starved of that success, and he'll have been thinking about Wraith Rovers in that game probably.
Oh yeah.
And not wanting to repeat because it's the same competition.
Am I right in saying, and it's just from memory, we won one League Cup in the 90s, didn't we? And that was under Wim Jansen against Dundee United, the 3-0 game.
Yeah.
Right, so we won one League Cup, we won one Scottish Cup, which was against Airdrie, 95.
By the way, before this goes out of my head, but prior to that League Cup final, we'd won the League Cup 11 times.
I know, JP, I know.
We've won it 11 times since.
I know. This is the crazy thing about League Cup. Like, you would get the Celtic view of the programme, whatever, and there was always that list of honours, right? And you would like have old stuff that your cousins and that had given you, like old mirrors and titles and flags and all that, and all the honours. They always used to print the honours, didn't they? And it never changed for ages. That League Cup was stuck on 8. We won the 8th. No, wait a minute. Sorry, we won the 9th League Cup. in the 1982 League Cup final, and it was Nicholas and McLeod against Rangers, 2-1. Jim Betts scored for Rangers, peeing down the rain, and we didn't win it again until Wim Jansen. 1997-98. That was 1982. We did not win the League Cup in 15 years. Now, if you look at Jock Stein's record of the League Cup, we got to the League Cup final 12 years in a row under Jock Stein. 12 years in a row we got to the League Cup final. But you're right, our record was terrible. And in the 90s, which is really strange, and I'm doing this from memory, please correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, we won the League Cup one time, and that was under Wim Jansen. We won the Scottish Cup once, 1995.
It was at Ibrox as well. It was at Ibrox.
Yeah, Coca-Cola Cup. I think the man of the match won a bike, if I'm right in saying. And we won one league under Wim Jansen. So the entirety of the 90s, one of each of the domestic trophies. So what Kenny Dalglish said there, absolutely, that was the mentality we had to have. We need to do this, year in, year out. When you hear other people in Scottish football saying that, like I've heard in the last wee while, maybe from Barry Ferguson, for example, this is what we're all about as a football club, you're thinking, it's not really. It's not actually, because in the last generation, you haven't done that. But Kenny Dalglish was like, this is our standard and we're setting out our stall. And you're right, we've gone on from there. I loved the Tommy Burns contribution. He was behaving like the manager on the sidelines.
Aye.
I love the fact that, it was 2-0, but it probably should have been 5. There was a couple off the line. Lubo hit the bar. I forgot all of this. I'd never, ever watched it back, even though I've got the video. They've released the video. That's how big a thing it was. We released the video because we beat Aberdeen in the League Cup. And that was a team that we had put 5, 6 and 7 past in the 3 league games that season. And then it was 2-0. I had completely forgot that Aberdeen got a man sent off. Couldn't have told you that. Couldn't have told you that. And did you notice that Lubo was a bit bemused when he was taken off for Alan Stubbs? Did you notice that bit as well?
Yeah.
When he came off.
And Tommy Johnson was asked about signing a new deal, and he said, well, I've still got 18 months in my contract, and why would you want to go anywhere when you've got days like this? And it's just as well for him that he did stick around, because he got to celebrate winning the league with Martin O'Neill and scored the goal in the game that clinched it. Remember when he put his hand over his mouth?
Oh, absolutely. And what about his celebration against Aberdeen? He's smoking a cigar. I love Tommy Johnson. And when we were watching the game, Liam and I spoke about the fact that we should get him on this show. I think he's got a great story, having come in as Tommy Burns' final signing, and then obviously going through that whole process of Weghorst, Barnes, Dalglish, then Martin O'Neill comes in. And you know what I mean? And he wins the treble with Martin O'Neill and all this. So he's got loads to tell. Joe Hamilton, afternoon trips, keep diving and look for a midfielder with a grit and muscle.
Yes.
Well, I was going to bring that up, but there's somebody coming in here saying, stop talking about Dunfermline. You've been talking about Dunfermline. Here we go. The underwater cabbage salesman. Dunfermline again. You've got to admit, though, it's been a bit of a blockbuster week for the Parters. Neil Lennon's in place. We've wished them all the best. JP, it seems like maybe at first an unusual choice, but then you look at and I watched his press conference and you think this could be a good match. And then he pulls Wanyama out his back pocket. That honestly, people were sending me, because yes, it's a city, but it's a bit like a village, Dunfermline, right? So people were sending me messages about, is it true about Wanyama? I didn't even respond to them. I just said, no chance. Of course it isn't. Next thing you know, he's standing there with the par scarf with all the faded red seats. That's something of a coup, is it not?
I mean, well, depending on, he's not, I don't think he's kicked a ball for a while. He's been out of contract and whatnot. So, well, we'll see what sort of condition he's in, probably on the weekend, because I'm sure he'll be in the squad. Maybe not starting, but I'm sure he'll be in the squad. But it's some move for him and for Neil Lennon to get him. Talk about getting the fans on side straight away. I don't really know what the reaction. You maybe know better than me. What's the reaction been like in Dunfermline to his signing?
Well, the whole thing about him and Lenny, it was. I've said this before, and I don't want to go over it because underwater cabbage salesman might switch off. The Pars are a sleeping giant. They've got a massive support. They've got a really good stadium, and they've obviously got an illustrious history. They've got some success in there. A lot of football clubs don't have that. But yeah, the fans, I just think, are at that stage where they've had the German ownership, and they've now got the new investment. And it's almost as if, here's another one. They've been at the top league for 13 years, JP, false dawn, false hope kind of thing. But it's almost as if this is a statement of intent by the new guy that's coming in and invested there's your Neil Lennon, there's Victor Wanyama. So Lennon's obviously been given some promises, hasn't he? We'll do this, we'll do that to back you.
He said he'd been speaking to the chairman regularly, and obviously they sold the Dunfermline vision to him. I really want him to do well. I genuinely, I would take. I would find it a bit hard to agree with anybody who, as a Celtic fan, would be like, I couldn't care less about him or something like that. It's like, even park the manager stuff, right? Of which a lot of it was good. Let's not forget what he did for Celtic as a player. That for me is the full reason why I would want him to do well in whatever job it is he gets.
Well, every night, because you were there, that was one of the most surreal moments in my life, never mind my Celtic supporting life, where we're backstage and Martin O'Neill's having a wee glass of wine with you in Las Vegas. It was just bizarre. But whenever we do anything with Martin O'Neill, he always makes a point of bringing up Neil Lennon. He brings him up, even if he doesn't, and he always comes into conversation anyway. And the reaction that O'Neill gets when he talks about Neil Lennon from the crowd is always positive. Mm-hmm. It's always positive, JP, right? And I think that when you look at him as a player and as a manager overall, you're thinking to yourself, that he's one of only 4 managers that's brought a treble to Celtic, Neil Lennon. Obviously, Martin O'Neill, Jock's team, Brennan Rodgers, he's one of only 4. So he's in the pantheon of Celtic greats in that respect. But there are certain people that I say things about. So Jimmy Johnson, no one took any more kicks than Jimmy Johnson as a Celtic player. He got kicked more than any other Celtic player in the history of the football club. No one headed more balls than Billy McNeill, right? When you think about the games he played, no one headed more balls than Billy McNeill. And nobody took so much off the field flack as Neil Lennon. I'm pretty sure that, you couldn't, if there's anybody out there who thinks that's wrong, let me know. I don't think anybody put up with so much personal attack, abuse, threats, bombs in the pot. Nobody had to put up with that. So you've got his playing career and his managerial career, and if you can separate it, and then you've got all that in his personal life that he put up with just to represent Celtic. So I wish him all the best.
Lives in Glasgow, and obviously it says a lot about him that he has actually made Glasgow his home, considering, like you said, the amount of grief that he's had in his time as a player and manager at Celtic. You might have not he could have been forgiven for being like, I'm out of here, I'm away to live in Manchester or somewhere or whatever, and then the cynical people would be like, but he's obviously dining out on his Celtic past. He's not really. Like, he's done some media work for in recent times, but obviously he's looked elsewhere to try and rebuild his managerial career, and it's not worked out. That sometimes happens, but eventually someone's going to reap the benefit of Neil Lennon as a manager, I think, and it may well be Dunfermline, and I would like it to be for his sake. I mean, if he gets a decent go at it in the summer, if they stay up, and then he gets to put a team together, who's to say he couldn't go on a run? And I mean, he's proven that he can do well at other clubs. I mean, he wasn't terrible at Hibs. He won a trophy in Cyprus, didn't he? He won So, like, someone will get the benefit of his focus and history. His experience and whatnot. I mean, he can point,
and clearly his phone book.
That too. But he can point to quite a lot. He can point to quite a lot in his career to sort of, a young 21-year-old at Dunfermline who wasn't born when he was playing for Celtic, and just sort of be like, inspire, I think, as well. I think he's picked up a lot from Martin O'Neill, probably, Gordon Strachan, Tommy Burns. I think he's got the year of Sir Alex Ferguson and has spoken to him at times as well. So, and there's probably maybe names I'm forgetting there. Like, was he not? Who was his? Was it Dario Gradi? Was it Crew with?
That was his Crew gaffer, yeah. But you mentioned Fergie. He mentioned Alex Ferguson in his press conference, because obviously the connection between Ferguson and Dunfermline. But I always remember the story. I asked Neil Lennon when he was manager of Hibs. I asked him about the Barcelona game, and he phoned Alex Ferguson that week and says, "How do I play Barcelona?" and Fergie spoke him through the different.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. Right.
Yeah, he phoned Alex Ferguson. There had been a game, I think the previous season, there had been a game where Man United nullified Barcelona. I'd need to check the fixtures. And so Lenny phones him, and Ferguson told him that this is what you should do. And he admitted that. He admitted that. But in terms of like
play that guy Miku you've got up front, and that'll do the trick.
Remember him. But you're right. He's got the phone book. He's got the experience, and he's obviously a winner. This is the thing, right? So he's a winner at Leicester. Leicester don't win things. It's very unusual, right? Yeah, they won the league, but that was an anomaly, really, in the great scheme of things. He won 2 League Cups with Leicester. Comes to Celtic, wins loads as a player, wins loads as a manager over 2 different periods. He gets Hibs promoted. He keeps bolting up, but then they go into administration, so you can almost write that off. There's mitigating circumstances there. He goes to Cyprus, he wins the cup. He goes to Romania, that's probably a bad move. So out of 8 different places that he's been as a player and as a manager, 7 he's been a winner. So bringing that mentality to a football club's huge, and building that into the culture, the day-to-day culture of a club who for the last 13 years haven't been winners.
I'm sorry, but no disrespect to Scott Brown, but if Scott Brown can put a successful team together in that league, I'm pretty sure Neil Lennon can. Given the tools and the time. Because Neil Lennon was always good at spotting a player as well. Like, there's no two ways about it. Some of the players that he picked up in that time as manager of Celtic, obviously we're going back 13, 14 years or whatever, but they were good players for Celtic who are still held in high regard. Guys like Gary Hooper and Chris Commons.
Like, a great knack of doing that.
He contributed pretty well as a player, Chris Commons, even if people don't know him as a person or whatever. But there was loads more in that time. Everyone surely can remember the players that Lennon pinpointed. Adam Matthews, like that kind of atmosphere that he created in that dressing room. Fair enough, I would imagine there was a lot of Anthony Stokes partying going on and everything else, and I'm sure that they all loved a night out, but he got a tune out of them. There's no two ways about that.
He seemed to do really well when he went into like championship level in England and brought in the likes of Commons or Joe Ledley or Adam Matthews, Gary Hooper. We'll not mention Daryl Murphy, but he managed to pluck a lot of players at that time. I would need to check where Newcastle were when Foster came in. Were they Championship or Premiership? But he was able to go down there, Championship.
Yeah.
And he was identifying great players at that level. And then you had the domestic ear to the ground with the likes of, and I know that we officially bought him from Wolves, but he had been on loan at Hibs, Lee Griffiths. Tony Stokes had spent time in Scotland, Charlie Mulgrew. And then you had all the kind of international players that he brought to the football club, Van Dijk, Wanyama, of course. Unbelievable. I mean, Effie Ambrose came in and did a job. I think another championship player that he plucked was Kelvin Wilson. So he definitely had a network. And if he can tap into that on a different scale, on a different level, they'll be fine. They'll be absolutely fine. JP, before we go though, and I know we're already 10 minutes over and you're a busy man, North side, shall we take a trip? The record is above you. They're coming to Glasgow, aren't they?
King Tut's next weekend. They're doing 2 nights. First one's sold out on the 5th of April, and the second one has some tickets left on the Sunday. So I'm really looking forward to meeting them. When I was a wee guy, I remember being I'm talking like 10, 11. I had no right to be into that sort of music at that time, but I just think it was a mixture of big friends, big brothers, and watching the ITV chart show, and the indie chart would come on, and then you'd see the video for Shall We Take a Trip, and I was just fascinated by them. And I know that they've not got a massive catalogue of albums or anything like that, and in fact I think the set length they're playing is only an hour. But they're a band of that time who bring to mind memories for me that was the beginning of my obsession with music. So to be working a show with them next weekend is going to be absolutely surreal. Hopefully off the back of a victory at McDermott Park earlier on in the day. Which
absolutely.
I'll hopefully be at too. But I'm looking forward to it. And I think, have you met Dermo before? Have you interviewed?
We did a session with Dermo. We went down to Manchester and we did a session. And at that time, his guitarist was a fella called Steve Ness, who has got the Celtic badge tattooed on his forearm. So they're good guys. They're absolutely good guys. So I'm looking forward to seeing them as well, JP. Northside, go and check them out if you're from that era. And even if you're not, I think the first night sold out really quickly. It was almost like instantly sold out the first night it touched, didn't it? A few tickets for the second night, so get along.
Simon Donnelly will be at one of the nights. I've not spoken to him yet to find out which one he's going to be at, but I would be astonished if he wasn't at them, because from following him on social media over the last few years, I know how much he loves Northside. He's posted it. In fact, I think he told me it was his first ever gig at the Barrowland was Northside.
That right?
I think so. I might be wrong, but I've got a feeling that might have been. And that Northside logo and poster is still on the inner stairwell in the Barrowland that's not accessible to the public, because there's a stairwell next to the dressing room and there's all posters in there. They've taken them down because apparently they were deemed a fire risk in the actual exits that were used by the public, because they're worried that someone was going to set fire to them or whatever. And it's just like, that's history, man. Like there's an Iggy Pop poster in that stairwell as well from like I don't know, like 80, 89 or 90 or something like that. And it's like the original kind of like pasted on poster. It's not like on with blue tack or whatever. It's like the actual old school posters of the Northside ones still there.
I hope they're able to take them off and archive them. Talking to archive, it's been 25 years since Vidar Riseth and Kenny Dalglish did their infamous press conference at Baird's Bar as well. Unbelievable. 25 years. Listen, everybody, thank you very much for getting involved. Thursday, I look forward to it every single week. I've been kind of off it a wee bit because I've been filming over the last few weeks, so it's great to get a good catch up with JP. So thank you, everybody, for getting involved. Give us a big thumbs up, like the video, subscribe to Acsom. We've got some great stuff happening very, very soon, as I said. And we're going to have a Glasgow HQ. Can't wait for that, JP. We might even do this in person at some point. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. And thank you to JP Mason for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.